And now that the recording is turned on, I'd say welcome again to the Siege of Pembroke. And Terry John is here ready to enlighten us on this topic. Thank you, Terry.
My pleasure. Well, welcome to Pembroke in 1648. I'm Terry John. I'm a retired teacher. I'm 81 years old, and I'm a member of a reenactment group called the Sealed Knot, which reenacts the civil wars that I'm going to tell you about now. And we have a map, well, I hope you have a map in front of you, of Pembroke as it was in 1611. This map was drawn up by a man called John Speed. And what you can see here is that Pembroke is actually constructed on a long limestone ridge, quite a high ridge with low ground on either side. So it consists basically of one long main street here, two churches, St Mary's, St Michael's, and Pembroke Castle. And it's a walled town. It is still a walled town. The walls were put up in the medieval period. And the gardens of the houses in Main Street back onto the walls, as they still do today. There's high ground to the north called Golden Hill, which in 1648 was pretty much open ground. And you also have then a suburb called Monkton, which also is on high ground. So Main Street is still pretty much as it was then. And this is it from the castle. So you can see St Mary's Church there, and in the distance, St Michael's. So what I'm going to do is take you on a tour around Pembroke as it was then and as it is today, so that you'll get some idea of the layout of the town and the geography of the siege. So that'll take us a few minutes. And then I'm going to talk to you about the Civil War, what happened in Pembroke before the siege, and then the siege itself, why there was a siege. So I hope that will be helpful to you. Okay, so we're back to the map. And the castle is here on a very high bluff at the west end of the ridge. And here we have the North Gate. So there's the castle on its bluff. And this is a reproduction drawing of what the North Gate probably looked like. It was demolished a long time ago, but the tower of St Mary's Church still towers over this part of the town. And if we go back to the map then, we have the walls running along here. This area was again tidal in 1648, but in recent years, a new bridge built across here with sluice gates in. So this has flooded now, and it's quite a sort of pleasant area to walk in. There are walkways along the side. And at the east end, you have Barnard's Tower, which is a medieval fortified tower, which is an addition to the defences. So here, oh, I seem to have gone berserk. So here is the view along the mill pond today with a walkway. The walls are here, and in the distance, you can just see the castle. And this is now quite a haven for wildlife. We have otters here, we have ducks and swans, all sorts of wild birds. And if we look then eastwards, here are the town walls, very much repaired, but on the site of the originals, and in part, still the original walling. And here we have Barnard's Tower. This is quite a formidable defence, and there is a well in the basement, so it could have been used as a supplementary garrison at any time. And if we go back to the map again, the walls still exist here. This is the north gate of the town with a little suburb outside it. And here today, this is known as Goose's Lane. So this is the site of the north gate. It stretched across the road here. It was demolished at some time in the past. We don't know exactly when. And this is the entrance to Goose's Lane. And this is Goose's Lane from the bottom, looking up towards the site of the north gate. So the wall ran all the way down here. And we think it's called Goose's Lane because in the medieval period, whenever there was a fair or a market, it would be held outside the town rather than within it. And this is where the poultry was sold, ducks, geese, chickens, and so on. And go back to the map because I want to just show you this part now. That tower's gone, but take note of these two, the East Tower and the Gun Tower. And then along here, all this was tidal. So when the tide came in, this would flood and make a formidable defense. When the tide was out, all you had were mud flats, apart from this little bridge. And then a main bridge across here. And you have then the West Gate just here and Monkton on higher ground there. So let's have a look at the East Tower. At some point in the Victorian period, somebody built a summer house on top of it. So it's also called the Gazebo Tower. But it is, in origin, it is the East Tower. And this is the Gun Tower. You can see how much the ground level has risen over the centuries because this is an arrow slit and it would never have been placed at ground level. So I would reckon there's perhaps 10, 15 feet of the tower underneath the roadway. And this is what is today called the Commons. The stream is still running there, and the Commons is now an area of car parks, grassland, and children's playgrounds. And the town of Pembroke is there perched on top of the ridge. And these are the houses at Westgate. There's nothing left of the Westgate now. You have this part of it, and this is the springing of the arch. So the arch would have crossed the road here and come down on this side. So the original ground level was much higher in 1648. And there were houses on this side, and the castle is just perched up here. So these houses go back to the 1400s, and they were here during the siege. So the castle is a formidable stronghold, and it actually controls the Milford Haven waterway. Milford Haven is quite a long, winding waterway that pierces right into the heart of the county with many creeks and bays off it. So it would have been an ideal landing place for an invasion force. So it was also the jumping off point for the sea crossing to Ireland. So there was considerable traffic going from Milford Haven across to Ireland. And people were extremely concerned then that maybe royalist forces in Ireland would come across and occupy Pembrokeshire. So both sides are very keen to control Pembroke Castle. And this is John Poyer. Now, John Poyer is quite a divisive character. He is said to have begun life as a kitchen boy in the houses of the gentry. But that may just be a rumour spread by his enemies. He made quite a number of them. His family were not gentry, but they seem to have occupied, the Poyers seem to have occupied a respected position in Pembroke. They held the office of bailiff to the mayor, and John Poyer himself was elected mayor at one point, and also the leader of the trained bands of Pembroke. The train bands were a sort of citizen militia formed to defend communities in times of trouble. And John Poyer is quite a wealthy merchant by the 1640s, dealing in wool, coins, skins, butter, tallow, and he's said to employ more poor people in cloth making than anyone else in Pembrokeshire. He may have been resented by the established gentry, and by gentry I mean old families who could trace their ancestry back many generations and who had held land in Pembrokeshire for generations and who had occupied influential offices in local government, and they tended to look down a little bit on the lower orders. So this is said to be a portrait of John Poyer. It's not authenticated. It's held in the National Library of Wales, and it's thought to be a memorial portrait painted long after his death, but we don't know any more about it than that. When the Civil War began in 1642, John Poyer declares for Parliament and seizes the castle and arms it. He's helped by this man. This is Roland Larne, who is of the gentry. The Larne family held large estates in the county, and they could trace their ancestry back to at least the 14th century. They may have been descended from an illegitimate child of Henry VIII. And Larne had served as a soldier on the continent, so he had military experience, but he seems to have got on quite well with Poyer. Now, when the Civil War begins, almost everybody has to make a choice about which side they're going to fight on. And this is a map of Pembrokeshire, and it shows you the houses and castles fortified by the Royalists and the houses and castles fortified for Parliament. And as you can see in the map, almost all the way around Pembrokeshire, as in the rest of Wales, most castles are held for the king. Pembroke here and Lamphey Palace are the only two garrisons holding out for Parliament. Now, here we have King Charles I. There are many reasons for the Civil War, and it's not always, the views are not always in sync, as you might say, as to what causes it. But the king regards himself as God's anointed. God has placed him in that position, and therefore he can't just walk away from it. He tends to see Parliament as a rubber stamp. It's there to do as he wants and to pass the laws that he wants, to raise taxes that he wants. But religion is also a concern. The king's wife, Queen Henrietta Maria, was a Catholic who was eager to convert people at her court. And many of the wealthy merchants who had contributed to the wealth of the kingdom were beginning to say, well, maybe we, as we contribute so much, maybe we should have some say in what goes on. There's no plan at this point to get rid of the king at all, just to try and persuade him to work with Parliament and to remove what were regarded as his evil advisors. But when the Civil War breaks out, there is fighting all across Britain, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, England. And Pembroke is blockaded during the war from 1642 to 45 at least twice, but it survives. And the war staggers to an end with a royalist defeat in 1645. So you would have seen fighting like this all across the country. But by 1645, the king is a prisoner. He's being held on the Isle of Wight. And this is a horrifying thought to many royalists, but the country is exhausted. Tens of thousands of dead out of a population of 5 million, at least 300,000 dead in England. more in Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. Towns and villages shattered. And Parliament is attempting to negotiate with the king to find a common ground by which the country can be governed. And the king says, yes, I will consider your suggestions, but maybe this won't work or that won't work. So they're not getting anywhere. And the radicals are becoming very impatient at this point, and they're beginning to say, look, if he won't cooperate, maybe we should just get rid of him. And that also is a horrifying idea to many. But from 1645, 1646, 47, Parliament is beginning to disband regiments. It's costing so much money to keep up a standing army, and many communities are bankrupt. Soldiers are owed large arrears of pay, and some are offered service in Ireland if they want to take it up. Other regiments are unwilling to disband because there are fears that if they do disband, Parliament will give in to the king. So there's a lot of tension, a lot of arguments at play. But Poyer, oh, here we go again. Poyer is unwilling to surrender the castle to Parliament. He has spent at least £20,000 of his own money to support Parliament. And he's also accused by his enemies of selling off goods from the Carew Castle estate. Now, he'd been given stewardship of the castle during the war when it was taken from its royalist owners. And he's said to have embezzled money. Don't know if this is true, but he did fall out with some of the other gentry families around Pembroke and even imprisoned some of them in the castle. So the case is brought to Major General Thomas Fairfax, who's the commander of the Parliamentary Army, who orders Poyer to hand over the castle. Poyer ignores this, and he is now, therefore, guilty of military disobedience because he is an officer of Parliament. So there are rumours now that Poyer is stockpiling supplies in the castle, including ammunition. And this is being fed back, this information is being fed back to Parliament. So early in 1648 or late 1647, we don't know the date exactly, Parliament sends Colonel Fleming to Pembroke to persuade Poyer to hand over the castle. And this is being discussed in Parliament. Now, a letter is sent from Pembrokeshire to Parliament, and I'm going to read you the part of the contents of this letter because it concerns John Poyer. And it says, he is seldom or ever sober, but constantly drunk in the afternoons. He hath written within this 3 weeks and taken prisoner Mr. William Hinton, Mayor of Pembroke last year, and Mr. Matthew Bowen, who was elected this year as Mayor, but the said Poyer deposed him and all the ablest men in the town, hoping to get monies out of them. He'd imprisoned them. He breaks open people's houses in the town and county and takes out what provisions he pleaseth and brings it into the castle. He hath drawn all the cattle of that part of the country within shot of the castle and kills them at pleasure for provisions of the castle. So rumours are beginning to fly, tensions are building up. And a rumour begins to circulate that Roland Larne is involved in a plot to seize Gloucester in the king's name. Larne is at Windsor at this point and he's placed under arrest. And John Elliot, one of the commissioners for assessment for Pembrokeshire, that his duty was to work out how much towns might pay Parliament for protection, how much they'd offer towards the war effort. He informs Parliament of the state of things within Pembroke and Pembrokeshire. And that information is forwarded to General Sir Thomas Fairfax, and it recommends that sufficient forces be sent to Pembroke to seize the town. And Fairfax then orders the dispatch of 200 men from the garrison at Gloucester to Pembroke. While they are on the march, this is the gatehouse. This is the main entrance into Pembroke Castle on Main Street, Westgate Hill. The House of Commons resolves that the Speaker should send another letter to Poyer ordering him to obey orders. And when this letter arrives, Poyer will not leave the castle to receive it. He allows Fleming to enter the castle on a safe conduct, is presented the letter, but says, I cannot read it because of illiterateness, which I don't believe. You know, he's a successful merchant, so I think he knows how to read and write. I think he's stonewalling. And he won't answer the letter. Meanwhile, Parliament has now ordered troops in Pembrokeshire and the rest of Wales to be disbanded. Poyer hears of this and sends a letter to Fleming in which he says, yeah, I am now willing to hand over the castle, but the sums of money offered to me and my soldiers are not suitable. But he is already at this point beginning to talk of holding Pembroke for the king, and he might well be in contact with the king or with Prince Charles's agents. We don't know. It's a bit of a mystery. Sorry, I'm obviously pressing too hard here on this. So, 200 musketeers from Gloucester arrive in Pembroke, and that enables Fleming to occupy the town, blockade the castle, and stop Poyer's foraging expeditions. Another letter is given to Poyer, and it says, you have 12 hours to deliver up the castle and all arms and ammunition. Otherwise, you and your adherents will be regarded as traitors. Additional troops are dispatched from Gloucester. Ships are to be sent into Milford Haven, and all commanders in the haven, of ships in the haven and in the River Severn, are required to send guns and men to aid the fight against Poyer. Pembroke has now become a centre of royalist hopes, and it's said that great England's honour lies in the dust, and little England lends a hand to raise it up. Little England was a term used to describe South Pembrokeshire, as English was then the predominant language in that area. So here's the castle again. And Poyer informs Fleming that the castle will be given up if soldiers are paid, and that he himself is given £1,000 reimbursement for the expenses that he has already incurred in Parliament's cause. Payment of the soldiers has been promised, but not the £1,000 to Poyer. And he knows this. And he's probably wasting time in the hope that more royalists will arrive. Fleming submits new terms to Poyer. He offers £200 and says that the garrison of the castle will receive pay. And then a few days later, without warning, Poyer opens fire on Fleming's headquarters within the town. According to parliamentary sources, 16 men are killed and 14 are wounded. And the garrison at Tenby, including an unruly company of Larne's own foot, decide to join Poyer's rebellion. At night, they take boats from Tenby Harbour and they sail round to Pembroke, and they probably enter the castle through one of the waterside postern gates. And at about the same time, Poyer hears that 2 companies of men under Captain Addis and Captain Agborough are coming to join him from Glamorgan. So Poyer sends a message secretly to the approaching troops that he will attack Fleming's force in their quarters, and the approaching supporters should attack from the rear. And that is what happens. Fleming and his men are driven completely out of Pembroke, and Fleming is missing for several days. Nobody knows whether he's dead or alive. By the 27th of March, Parliament has received news of the rout at Pembroke and resolves to send a very large force to Pembroke. In the meanwhile, 2 companies of parliamentary soldiers arrive by boat in Milford Haven. They come ashore near this church, Pwllcrochan Church, and they occupy it. And the next day, Poyer appears before it with 100 foot soldiers and 2 troops of horse. There's a very fierce battle, a musketry battle, but eventually the men within the church, those parliamentary soldiers, they agree to leave and not to come again to Milford Haven, and they set off by sea for Cardiff. Excuse me. And Prince Charles now sends Poyer a commission to be governor of the garrison and of the inhabitants of Pembroke, with the authority to hold the town and castle for the king's use. And one of Poyer's associates, Colonel Powell, also receives a commission to be governor of Tenby. So they are now in open support of the king. And Poyer and Powell now demand contributions of money and supplies from many local parishes to fund their war effort. And they order the militia to assemble at Colby Moor, Carmarthen and Lampeter. So men like this are called into service. They must bring 3 days' provision. They're hoping for several thousand men. In fact, it's only about 1,400, but they're expecting further aid from Ireland, where Lord Inchquin has declared for the king. And in April, Colonel Horton, who commands 1,200 parliamentary troops, sets off from Brecon on the orders of General Fairfax to put matters at Pembroke to a speedy issue, they say. And he heads first for Neath, where he will join up with Colonel Oakey. On the 10th of April, Poyer and his colleague, Colonel Powell, publish a declaration which states that we will use our best endeavours to bring the king to a personal treaty with his parliament in freedom, honour and safety, to the end that the just prerogatives of the king, privileges of parliament, laws of the land, liberties of the people may be maintained and preserved in their proper bounds, and the Protestant religion, as it now stands established by the law of the land, is restored to the kingdom with such regard to tender consciences as shall be allowed by the Act of Parliament. There's still argument about why Poyer and Larne and Powell changed sides. Larne is regarded as a very upright, honest man, so his motives are very difficult to discern. But my own personal feeling is that these men have fought for Parliament not to get rid of the king, but to bring the king to an agreement with Parliament, and then the king can continue to rule. And this talk of executing the king is a step too far for them. And I think that's why they revolt and change sides. But other people have different views. But volunteers are making their way to Pembroke from all over the kingdom. until more than 1,000 men have gathered to defend the town in the king's cause. The townspeople are forced to feed the new arrivals and to work on the town fortifications. But I wonder how many townspeople were left within the walls of the town. I think many, realizing what was coming, had probably left. If they had somewhere else to go, they would have left. So maybe there were not many left. But again, we don't know. What you would really like to have is somebody within the town keeping a diary, but nobody did, unfortunately. So in mid-April, Colonel Houghton encounters a force led by Colonel Fleming and defeats it near Carmarthen, and Fleming is killed. And by the last day of April, Larne is back in Pembroke, having escaped from custody. And Colonel Houghton at Brecon plans an attack on Pembroke. But hearing that the enemy are now moving into Glamorgan eastwards, he sets off to intercept them. Larne knows that Houghton is approaching and that Oliver Cromwell has marched out. Now, here's Cromwell. He's marched out of Windsor, heading towards Pembrokeshire on Parliament's instructions on the 3rd of May. So Larne knows that Houghton is approaching and Cromwell is not far behind. So Larne marches out from Pembroke, moves eastwards to challenge Houghton, hoping to defeat him before he joins up with Cromwell. And on the 8th of May, the Battle of St Fagans is fought between forces commanded by Major General Roland Larne and Colonel Powell on one side, and the parliamentary troops of Colonel Houghton on the other. Larne is wounded, his brother Thomas is killed, and their army is scattered. Larne flees back to Pembroke. Powell takes refuge in Tenby. Poyer, meanwhile, has remained in Tenby, and he's no doubt busy provisioning the castle and strengthening the fortifications of the town. And on the 14th of May, the advance guard of Houghton's force makes an unsuccessful attempt to storm Tenby, and Houghton blockades Tenby. So we have a map here of South Wales, and it just shows you Cromwell's approach from Gloucester. He goes to Monmouth, then brings his troop to Chepstow, where they capture the castle, on to Cardiff. He's too late for the Battle of St Fagans, but that's where it took place. Then he moves on through Swansea, Carmarthen, and eventually arrives at Tenby. He confers with Colonel Houghton, and they agree that Houghton will continue to besiege Tenby. Cromwell moves on to Pembroke. And here is the town again, because Cromwell sets up a huge encampment on the slopes of St Daniel's Hill overlooking the town in this area. He also places a little garrison at Monkton, puts some guns up here, and the town is more or less surrounded. What they lack are cannon, because the ship bringing cannon from Gloucester has been wrecked in the River Severn. So they managed to obtain cannon from a warship called the Lion in Milford Haven. And 2 of these cannon are placed in Monkton Churchyard here. And they open fire on the castle. So this is the sort of gun that would have been used. And there's quite an interesting story. I'm going to divert a little bit. The vicar of Monkton is a man called Peregrine Phillips, and he has parliamentary soldiers billeted on him, whether he wants them or not. But he knows that these soldiers, will take any supplies they can find because their food supply is not regular. He doesn't want to lose the food he's got, so he stuffs the pillows on the beds with grain and flour and the soldiers sleep on the pillows, not knowing what's underneath. So very craftily, Peregrine Phillips managed to preserve his food supplies. And there's also a story, I don't know how true it is, that he has several cows and his milkmaid has to milk the cows every day. And she does so sitting between two cannon. And they don't fire the cannon until the milking is finished. I think it's an apocryphal story, but, you know, it's a good one. So here's the view of Monkton from the castle. So the cannon are probably here, and this long mound of earth you can see is probably the remains of the defences put up to protect the cannon. So you'd have had a long, long wall of what was called gabions with gaps in for the mouths of the cannon to protrude through. So these are gabions. They're wickerwork baskets stuffed with stone and sand to deaden the effect of shot. So Cromwell's forces now number about 6,000 men, with another 2,000 probably stationed at those garrisons along the Welsh coast. So there's Cromwell's own regiment, Colonel Pride's regiment of foot, Colonel Horton's horse, Oakley's dragoons, and Colonel Overton's regiment of foot. The armed men within Pembroke, Poyer's men, numbered about 2,000. Some are quartered within the castle, but the rest are probably billeted in the homes of the townsfolk. And the townsfolk have no choice in this matter. And it's also likely that the arms and ammunition connected by Poyer are stored within the castle. Although the two churches, St. Mary's and St. Michael's, both sturdily built of stone, may also be used as ammunition stores, possibly to store horses as stables, also as dormitories. And the gates of the town, the three gates, are no doubt reinforced with earth, stone, wooden barricades, and so forth. Several attempts are made to storm the town gates by the parliamentary forces, but no dates are given for these attacks. But they must have occurred after the time of Cromwell's arrival there at Pembroke on the 24th of May and mid-June. On the 31st of May, Tenby surrenders to Horton, so Horton can bring his men across as well. So here is the town again. And on the 4th of June, a storming party attacks Pembroke and attempts to climb over the town walls. So that attack is likely to have happened here, or possibly along Goose's Lane. But we don't know. There's no information as to where it is. They prepare scaling ladders to climb up over the walls, but are horrified when they put the scaling ladders up because they're too short and the men can't get over the wall. The defenders open up a heavy musket fire and 23 of the attackers are killed and 4 officers severely wounded. So more guns are taken from the warship Lion in Milford Haven. And shortly after, Major General Roland Larne leads a raiding party of dragoons and cavalry out of Pembroke and engages the enemy in quite a sharp fight. 9 of Larne's men are killed and 20 taken prisoners, and the rest retreat back into the castle. So the whole town is surrounded and besieged now. On the 7th of June, Cromwell's soldiers celebrate news of the defeat of rebels in Kent, because when it's learned that Pembroke has declared for the king, there are royalist risings in other parts of England and Wales. The noise of these celebrations is heard within the castle, and Poyer says, well, that noise is to celebrate the arrival of Prince Charles. He has come to our aid with supplies and reinforcements. Cromwell writes to the Committee of Carmarthen and says, he wants shells for mortars and shot for cannon. His supplies are very low, and by the end of June, he's forced to fire stones into the town. But things are getting very bad within the walls of Pembroke. Supplies have been cut to half a pound of beef and the same of bread, and the same rations presumably applies to the townspeople. Desertions begin from the town and the castle. Soldiers climb over the walls and try to escape. Poyer promises his officers that he will not retreat into the castle to endure a separate siege. If the town cannot hold out, he will surrender. And on the 13th of June, Cromwell plants 2 more guns on Golden Hill and opens fire on the town. It's very effective. The cannonballs punch through the walls of buildings in the town because these are just timber buildings, and many of the buildings go up in flames. There's total panic in the town. The thatched roofs burn easily and the fire spreads from house to house. Of those houses which are not damaged in the bombardment, well, within a few days, the thatch is being pulled off the roof of those houses and is being used to feed the horses. On about the 15th of June, a breach is made in the town walls. Again, we're not exactly sure where, but it's probably at the east end of town somewhere. And a storming party forces its way in, and there is a running battle up Main Street, almost to the castle gates. About 100 defenders are killed, but the attack falters when a major in the parliamentary army fails to bring up a reserve of pikemen and muskets. Rowland launches a counter-strike and drives the enemy out of the town, killing over 30 of the attackers and wounding many more. So Main Street is a shambles, filled with dead and dying men, littered with weapons, belts, blood-stained shoes, hats, overturned barricades, and burning houses. And the poor people of Pembroke are probably cowering in the cellars of their houses, wishing for it all to be over. But at the end of the month, the very heavy siege guns finally arrive outside Pembroke, having been taken out of the shipwreck, repaired, and sent round again. So on about the 4th of July, Cromwell and his Council of War decide to make another assault on Pembroke, and this attack causes such alarm that 120 of the castle garrison vow never to fight again. And Poyer and Larne declare that if relief does not reach the town within 4 days, they will surrender. And that persuades the 120 men to take up their arms again. But before the 4 days are up, knowing that their position is hopeless, Poyer attempts to obtain terms of surrender from Cromwell. Now, there is a long-standing legend in Pembroke, which I'm going to relate to you, which may or may not be true. There are definitely wells of water within the town that the defenders can get supplies from, but there is also said to have been water pipes coming down from a hill outside the town, underground, buried under the ground, crossing the river at this point and coming into the castle. Cromwell is anxious to find out where those buried pipes are, and he's doing his best to find out, but nobody will tell him. None of the captured men will tell him, until at last a man called Edmonds, who is a carpenter and who is a native of Monkton or Pembroke, he betrays the location of the pipes. They are dug up and broken, so a major water supply is cut off. Cromwell then does something that annoys Edmonds does something which annoys Cromwell. We don't know what, but it must have been something pretty bad, because Cromwell orders him to be hung on the site of the breaking of the water pipes. and he's hung and buried in the hole. After the war is over, Edmund's family is not allowed to live within Pembroke. They must live outside the town walls. And just as a proof, this house is said to be the cottage in which the family live, or maybe an earlier one on the site. And it is outside the town walls. This is the site of the discovery of the breaking of the water pipes, where Edmunds is said to have been buried. And in the 1890s, fresh water pipes were being dug into the ground here, and they did discover human remains. I don't know what became of them, but it was thought that those are the remains of Edmunds, if the story is true. Now, by the 7th of July, Cromwell's heavy guns have severely damaged the town and the castle, and at least 30 people, townsfolk, have died in the bombardments. And the garrison knows that they can't hold out any longer. So Poyer sends out a message saying that he has always been loyal to Parliament since the beginning of the war. But Cromwell will not consider anything other than complete surrender. He needs to leave Pembroke as fast as possible to put down a rebellion in Scotland. He sends in this man. This is Hugh Peters, who is his army chaplain. And Hugh Peter enters the town with the proposals and is held hostage overnight in Poyer's house. Now, he's locked up in the cellar. And this house, although it's a modern house, is said to be the site of John Poyer's house in Pembroke. And it still has a medieval cellar underneath it. If this is true, that it is the site of John Poyer's house, then the cellar is the one in which Hugh Peters was held. And while he's there, he discovers letters from the King and Prince Charles, which give away the whole plan to declare Pembroke for the King. Many of the houses along Main Street have got modern frontages, but they are in origin medieval, and many of them, like this one, have got medieval cellars still underneath them. So the leaders of the garrison are horrified by the demand that they should surrender unconditionally. So they ask for better terms, but Cromwell just sends in further proposals with minor alterations, and he says, I expect an answer within 2 hours. And the garrison realise, and the officers of the garrison know, that they've got no choice. They must surrender. And one thing that persuades them is that the terms of surrender specifically state that the townspeople are promised freedom from plunder. If they had not surrendered and the town had been stormed, anyone within the town could have been put to the sword or plundered of everything they owned. But that is a specific guarantee within the terms of surrender that there will be no plunder. So the surrender takes place on the 11th of July, and Cromwell enters the town. And this is the Old York Tavern. It's now a private house, but it was a very well-known inn up until quite recently. And this is where Cromwell, having entered the town, sets up his headquarters. And if you look at the back of the Old York Tavern, there is this building attached to it by intermediary buildings. This is a medieval building in origin, and my feeling is this is where Cromwell actually stays. It's quiet, it's at the back of the town. He's not going to be under threat there. He'll have soldiers and the rest of the inn to keep guard. So I think this is where he sets up. Now, the troops occupying the castle are allowed to leave. They're allowed to march out of the castle and make their way to their own homes. Larne Poyer and Colonel Powell are taken into custody. Cromwell gives orders for the destruction of parts of the castle and the town walls, and within days of the surrender, he leaves for Scotland, taking with him the three chief prisoners who are left at Nottingham. They are later sent to the army headquarters at Windsor. Prince Charles attempts to intervene in the court-martial that follows. They are tried for high treason in April 1649. And they all say that they have served Parliament well in the First Civil War, and the families of the condemned plead for mercy. According to tradition, the town maces of Pembroke are taken to London. They're made of silver, and it's an attempt to buy pardon for Poyer and the others, but they disappear, and they were not recovered until the end of the 19th century. They're now kept within the town hall. But there is now another legend. The Council of State decides in its mercy that only one of the three men shall die. And they say to the three, you can choose which one of you is executed. And they say, no, we fought together. We're not going to choose. So it's decided that lots shall be drawn. 3 pieces of paper are prepared, 2 bearing the words life given of God. The third is blank. The jailer's daughter, God help her, is given the job of handing the slips of paper to each of the men. She's given a black bag with the paper in, so she doesn't know what it says, what any of the papers say, but she takes a slip out and gives a slip to each man. And it's Poyer's, which is the blank sheet. And he must have realized exactly what this meant. And it must have shown on his face, because the little girl says, "Sir, did I do well?" And Poyer says, "Yes, my dear, you have done very well," which is quite a thing. He's shot at Covent Garden on the 25th of April, 1649, and is buried in London. Now, here's a strange link to the siege. This is Mark Twain. And in 1883, Mark Twain was reading a copy of Carlyle's Letters and Speeches of Oliver Cromwell, and he came across an account of the execution of Poyer, and he's fascinated by the tale of the child who had chosen the lots. And he wrote a short story based on the account he read, and he entitled it The Death Disc, also called it The Death Wafer, and it was published in 1901 in the Christmas issue of Harper's Magazine. More than that, I don't know if you recognize this man, but this is D.W. Griffiths, the great silent movie director. And Twain's story was staged as a one-act play in the Children's Theatre at Carnegie Hall in 1902. And in 1909, it was made into a silent film by D.W. Griffiths. But I don't think any copies of it have survived. So the castle, parts of it demolished by Oliver Cromwell and then rebuilt in the 19th and 20th centuries. Parts of the town walls, as I've said, demolished, so the town could never again be held as a stronghold in defiance of Parliament. Poyer's wife, Elizabeth, who had gone up to London to be with him in his last days, returned to Pembroke with her children, and she is said to have lived in a house which stood somewhere here. We know from accounts that she was still living in Pembroke in the 1690s, a very old lady by then. And subsequently, some of her and John Poyer's descendants emigrated to America. So I hope that's all made sense to you. I hope you found it interesting. That is the story of the Siege of 1648.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. That's fascinating and such detail. as I said at the beginning, we're so grateful that you can help us understand many details from history of this area. Many of the people on the call have ancestors or some connection to Pembrokeshire, and I've
Oh,
heard
great.
from you. A few had written in advance to our webmaster that this is an area of Wales that means something personal. Are there questions from? Yes, I see David Jeans has his hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. I enjoyed the talk. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes, I
Yes.
can.
Yes. So my great grandmother was born in Saundersfoot, and my
Really?
grandfather, who was English, joined the Royal Artillery and went to Pembroke Dock for training. And I've visited Pembroke Castle, Tenby, and other places that you've mentioned quite a few times, uh, including with my family. My young children really enjoyed Pembroke Castle, particularly going down to the cave, the Wogan, I guess, which is underneath it. So,
Oh,
uh,
that's spectacular.
yeah, I was just wondering what part that cave, if anything, played in the siege. I don't think you mentioned it.
No, I didn't, because we don't know actually what went on there. Because for those who haven't been there, it's a natural cavern underneath the castle, opening out onto the walkway that runs below the castle. So I think it was barricaded. I don't think they would have left it unprotected because it gives access into the castle. So I think it was very powerfully barricaded, but we don't know actually what went on in Wogan's Cavern at the time. As that answered your question. It's not really an answer.
Well, as you said, so many things might not be entirely true or even true at all. It's hard to know.
If it's of any interest whatsoever, it is haunted by the ghost of a Civil War soldier. So maybe somebody died there. That's the story.
Very good. Are there other questions? And meanwhile, in the chat, Joanna has said that she lived near uh, Haverfordshire West, actually her godparents, and she was there for school. Thank you, Joanna.
No, can you hear
West.
me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I actually lived in Dale. My father was based in the Royal Naval Station in Dale. And it was a listening station. I can't remember much about it because I just ran amok and had a wonderful time growing up. But then I went from Dale County Primary School to Milford Haven Grammar School. My godparents actually lived in Haverfordwest, or Haverfordwest as we call it, Little England beyond Wales. So whilst I'm Welsh, I'm from Swansea, from Neath actually. I'm not, my Welsh language is not brilliant. Although I belong to the DC Welsh, Washington Welsh. So I sort of, when I saw this come through, I thought I've got to listen to this. It's all my background, it's all my heritage.
Joanna, can I ask you,
Yeah.
if it's not a rude question, when were you at Milford Haven Grammar School? What years?
Do you know what? I was trying to remember, and I damned if I can remember. I look for this. Is this you're David up in Ottawa, aren't you? Is this David?
No, this is Terry. This is Terry you're talking to.
Terry, right, Terry. I don't know. Leave me I'll double check. I cannot remember. I'll be honest about that.
The reason why I've asked is
Yep.
that I was a pupil at Milford Haven Grammar School.
Oh,
Right. Ah,
neat.
aha. Right. It's
So
Terry?
I was at the school from, I think, 1955 to 62.
No, I think I was in the Far East. Do you know what, Terry? Which Welsh group are you with? You're not.
I'm not with, no, I'm living in Pembroke. So
Oh, you're in
the only
Pembroke now.
Yes, yes. I
Oh,
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that maybe I didn't introduce well. I was asked I asked for Terry's contact from the US
yeah.
in order to research my genealogy, and he's always been very gracious and helpful. And that's when I asked him if he would present about Pembroke.
Ah, right. I mean, if I can have your email, please, if that's okay. I mean, I live here now, just outside DC, but it's but all my family, and funnily enough, I've started doing my genealogy as well, and I feel it's really important. You know, I've got my grandmother was Scottish actually. And but moved down and sort of the family I'm finding family all over the place. It's the most fascinating thing I've ever done. So I'd like to know more as well. My godparents, my mother's best friend, um, Auntie Mary and Uncle Ivor Rees lived in Haverfordwest, and he was the town clerk. From what I understand, he was an attorney, um, but he was the town clerk for the longest time.
I
And
suggest that that's a good idea for you to
yeah,
continue via email so that we can entertain other questions from these people
yes,
here. Thank
sorry,
you.
pardon. Yes,
And I
sorry.
will say before I let Robert speak, who has his hand raised, I'm trying to get an invitation for your video capability, Terry, through one of our attendees who said that there's a way to invite you to be on video, but I see that your camera does show that it is on and we don't see you. It would be nice to see you. So we'll try in these last few minutes. Next, so if you Terry can see anything come your way to activate your camera, but if not, like I said, that's fine. Robert.
Okay.
Yes. Hello. I'm Robert Humphreys. I'm originally from Newport in
Hi.
the Newport in Gwent, not the one in Pembrokeshire. And
Yeah.
I'm part-time director of the Great Plains Welsh Heritage Centre, which is actually located in Nebraska. And the reason the question I have is, was the Siege of Pembroke, was it the end of Pembroke's military history? Did it have a role to play in as some sort of staging post for Cromwell's continuing campaigns in Ireland, for example?
Excuse me. He does actually pass through Tenby and through the Milford Haven Waterway at least twice to get to Ireland. But it doesn't seem to have played any part in any subsequent actions in the Third Civil War in 1651-52. There's not a lot happening in Pembrokeshire then.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, or did you want to ask any more?
Yes, I just wondered if that was kind of the end of Pembroke as a military Pembroke, the town and the castle as a military site.
It took Pembroke a long time to recover from the Civil War, as with Tenby. Tenby was badly damaged, and they don't recover their prosperity for some time. And Daniel Defoe, who came to Pembroke in the early 1700s, I think, he says that there was still a lot of empty spaces or gaps in the rows of houses in Main Street. So I think it took a long time for Pembroke to recover.
Yeah, it actually, I mean, it sounds almost like the impact on, on some counts was similar to the impact of, the bombing in World War II, of a similar, sort of devastation across certain parts of England and Wales.
I think so, yeah.
Thank you.
Magdalene has raised her hand. Yes. Just unmute yourself there, Mag. Okay.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to say hello to Robert Humphreys, because I'm from Newport too. My husband and I are from Newport also. There was just one thing I was going to mention. My best friend in Wales was in Pontier, and they lived in the Pontier house. And so the legend goes, and that's in the town of Pontier near Caerleon, And the legend goes there. I spent many Sunday afternoons polishing the horse brasses there. So Cromwell was supposedly there and rode his horses over the roof of the Pontier house just to prove that he could do so. Whether this is true or not, I don't know, but it's always been a legend. So I just thought I'd add that to your story, Terry, of the route of Cromwell through Wales.
Oh, thank you. That I didn't know. It all adds to the picture, I think, doesn't it?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Next, I see Joanna, and then I think Robert's hand was up, but maybe Joanna, did you want to say another thing?
Yes, I would. One of the things that came up in the siege is General Fairfax as being a part of the siege of Pembroke. General Fairfax, I live in Fairfax, and we've done a lot of work with the Fairfax family, which originally came over from England. Is this the same line? Is this the same Fairfaxes? Do you know? Is there any way, Terry, of finding out? Because I still talk to Nicholas and Annabel Fairfax. He's Lord Fairfax now, but they're great friends of mine, and they live on the Isle of Wight now. They've moved from London, so that would be such a great tie. I had no idea.
To be honest, I don't know whether Fairfax is related to your friends, but they could find out
Yeah.
if they look online at Debrett's peerage and put in Fairfax, it should come up with all the ancestors. You should be able to trace who their ancestors are.
Right. And it was General, and I missed his first name.
Major General Thomas Fairfax.
Thomas Fairfax, because I've also got the book of the Fairfaxes, and I can read through that and look at that. I didn't have a clue. I mean, that's incredible. What year was that? 18? Did you say 18 something? No.
No.
17.
Fairfax is around in the 30s, 1630s, 40s, 50s.
Right. Okay. Oh gosh, no, that's lovely. That's lovely.
I mean,
I don't think he knows at all.
You can look up Thomas Fairfax on the internet.
Yep. Okay, we'll do. We'll do.
Thanks.
Yeah. Smashing. Thank you.
All right.
No,
that's very nice of you to add that. David has his hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to mention you talked about Cromwell coming into Wales via Monmouth and Chepstow, and you may be aware of a bit of history about Chepstow, that the castle had been captured by the Royalists before Cromwell arrived, and Cromwell couldn't overcome that garrison, so he went on moving west, leaving Chepstow until guns could be brought up from England. And when they did arrive, Chepstow's wall was breached, and the royalist who had taken the castle, Sir Nicholas Kemys, was killed, and his head was cut off. And there's a bronze plaque on the wall in Chepstow Castle about that incident. But the thing that it has to do with Pembroke is that Nicholas Kemy's son was also made a baronet by King Charles during the Civil War, and he commanded cavalry out of Raglan Castle in the first part of the war, and then was with John Poyer in Pembroke during the 1648 siege. At least this is the family story, and the Kemys family were based at a mansion called Kevin Mabley just outside Cardiff, and my grandmother was born there and grew up on the estate, and her father was the bailiff to the Chemist Tint family who owned that. So that's my interest, and I've followed very closely and written about the history of the Chemist family, and certainly the Siege of Pembroke in 1648 is a part of their story, and so is the Siege of Tenby, because a cousin, Edward Kemys, who was also a royalist, was with Colonel Powell at Tenby during that part of the siege. So I've come across many references to Civil War conflicts concerning that particular pro-royalist family.
Yeah, I think all these families were interconnected. It's quite interesting. I've been looking into the gentry families in Pembrokeshire, and they are all interconnected and connected to gentry families in Glamorganshire. And the interesting thing to me is that you end up with some of these families fighting on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So within the family, you will have a parliamentarian supporter and a royalist. But I knew that one of the Chemist family was at Pembroke. I didn't know about Tenby. So thank you for that.
Magdalene has her hand up.
I just wanted to ask a question. So I went to Tredegar House to school, which was the home of the Morgan family. And were their ancestors royalists or not? Do you know, Terry?
No, the short answer is no, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I don't know about that.
Okay. The other thing, Terry, is if you wanted to follow the Cromwell, the Pontier, you could Google Pontier House, the Pontier Inn. There's pictures of it. There's actually pictures of when King Charles was Prince Charles in there pulling a pint. So that might be a picture you might want to add.
I will definitely look it up. Can I ask, thank you for that. Can I ask you if you know the village of Stepaside in Pembrokeshire?
Yes.
No. Oh, no.
It's not far from Tenby.
No. So our family is my husband's family is in Broadhaven.
Right.
Which is, not, so I don't know it now.
Well, I'd like to tell you, if I may, the story of why it's called Stepaside.
Okay.
Cromwell is marching to Pembroke with his troops, and as they approach along the road, they meet some very heavily loaded farm wagons coming in the opposite direction, which are blocking the road. And Cromwell realizes he can't get his men through, so he shouts at them, "Right, lads, step aside." And they all step off the road and the wagons go through. And since then, the village has been known as Stepaside.
Stepaside. I'll have to tell that story. Thank you. That's great.
Okay.
Good to know.
Well, this has been lively, which is great. It's about 18 minutes after 3. I guess there aren't any other questions, neither here nor in the chat. So let's hope for more to come. And Terry, we want to stay in touch there are multiple groups of interested Welsh groups represented on this call, just so you know, as a first timer here. So I will certainly I can put my email in the chat right now if anyone wishes to correspond. As I said, that is coming momentarily. Feel free to write to me anytime. I'm a terrible student of the Welsh language, I will say that. I've been trying, but I am very interested in genealogy and history, as many of you also are here. So,
Mark, can I ask you, could you pass on my email address to Joanna?
Yes, absolutely. I have the email list of the attendees here, and I'll write Joanna directly and let her put you two in touch.
Yeah.
And as I said, anyone else following up on this, if you want access to the recording of this meeting, of this presentation, or any other questions you have about the history of the region, we'll certainly try our best. Terry and I will. And I'll be coming to Wales for the very first time next summer. I'm coming a year earlier than planned to Pembroke for the very first
Great.
time. So
We will meet up.
we will meet up, and then we don't need to worry about a camera or anything on Zoom, right?
I'll take you on a tour of the siege of 1648.
Thanks. Thanks.
Be
Bye,
prepared to be
everyone.
bored.
Well, thank you, Terry, and thank you, Mark. This was great.
You're
Yes.
welcome, and
Thank you very much indeed. It was
hope to see many of
wonderful.
you soon at future events.
Diolch yn fawr.